So I'm Kierstyn Berlin, and we're recording for the YourTown television series. Mark and I came up with a concept for a design series, and this will be the first of many. Mark and I both share a passion for architecture and design, and so we really wanted to share some of the conversations that we were having with the community. Obviously, YourTown in general is about putting a spotlight on different businesses and personalities in the community and giving a sort of a little more in-depth perception into what you're up to, what your business is about. So I'd love to just first get, to know about your business, to know about your history here, how long you've been here, and sort of where you see your business going in the near future.
Well, my name's Rob Carver, and I'm an architect in Carmel and Big Sur, and I've been practicing here for over 40 years, and mostly on the coast, and our offices are at the Barnyard.
We've known each other for a long time. We've both been in this community for a long time, and you stand out to me as I have a little bit of an obsession with the history of architecture and the local, especially the local history of architecture. And you've always been one of my favorite architects here. And I think one of the things that's really unique about you, one of the things that I'd really like to dive into is, we're on this amazing Monterey Peninsula coastline. We have elaborate design review processes for this community. I mean, maybe more than anywhere else in the world. I mean, especially when you get into the Big Sur coastline. You especially, in my mind, are very creative in your designs and very unique in combining the environment and the buildings in a way that really fits the site. You're really obviously integrating the clients and the sites and in a creative way. You're not an architect that you go to if you want to plug and play or just copy and paste. You're an architect that's really looking at the site. And I might be able to do plans for a house in Seaside, any day. But if you were to ask me to design something in Big Sur, the first things that come to my mind is you can't build new construction. You can't get through the Coastal Commission, or it will take you a long time. It will be too expensive. Access to resources there is difficult. Sometimes the roads are really difficult. You're working in remote places. You're working with off-the-grid systems a lot of times. So for me, the idea of building in the way, and a lot of the things that you've accomplished, when I look at that, it literally looks like an impossibility to me. So especially when you get also into the conservativeness of this community around nature, and particularly the Big Sur coastline. So one of the things I'd love to hear about is how you got into that particular demographic, and maybe some insights to your process and how you approach dealing with the limitations that are there.
Well, Kierstyn, I bought a property in Big Sur in 1974, and I've lived on it ever since. And I was going to the University of California, Berkeley, College of Environmental Design, studying architecture. It was my senior year, and it was a little cabin on the property, and it was the end of the line for the phone, and actually the phone had it was a party line. I don't know, people have never even heard of that. But because I lived there, I wanted to eventually build my own house, and I did actually build it, and I had to learn the process. And so I became involved. They were writing the Big Sur land use plan at the time. I probably put in about 1,000 hours working as a community representative, trying to shape the plan for the residents than for the public. It had to be a combination. It was very slanted towards public access and public, and really the private people in Big Sur are the property owners are the ones that are the caretakers of the land, and they care about it more than anybody, and I care about it more than anybody. So our success in getting permits is knowing the rules. and not trying to go beyond the rules. We can push the rules, but you don't go beyond them. And so a lot of times people will come from out of town and they're not used to that. And maybe they have an out-of-town architect and he's not used to that or she's not used to that. And then you get the horror stories. And there shouldn't be a horror story. You mentioned it can take time and money. Yes, it does take time and money, but you can go through the process in a linear fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think one of the things that I also wanted to talk about today was this love of nature. And really, I think a lot of what brings people to the Monterey Peninsula is this sort of immersion of living in a city and in a community, and also sort of feeling like you're still in nature and the different microclimates and access to that. And I think there's a deep appreciation here for nature. And you know, it's interesting to me because I have conversations with people. I've always considered myself an environmentalist, and you get a lot of like black and white thinking around development, like especially in some place like Big Sur, like that there's this sort of notion as an environmentalist that kind of any development in nature is this degradation or abuse of the land. And I'm just so glad that you touched on that, because I see a lot of times with residents in Big Sur, there's a connection and there's an enhancement and a stewardship of nature that can happen within an architectural design, where you know, these worlds don't need to be like development and nature are not these separate things. And I think if there's one sort of marketing thing that I would want to push onto like a potential builder or potential client is this integration of really incorporating the natural scapes into the plans and into in a way that you can really understand that it's enhancing it.
Well, our goal is actually to be invisible, and that's our way of blending in and respecting the beautiful sites that we get to work on. And so we've been pretty successful with some houses that you could drive right by, you'd never even see it.
Right, well, many. I mean, that's sort of a trademark of Big Sur architecture, and that's actually how I met you years ago. Is there was a man from Silicon Valley who realized there was all this amazing modern architecture in Big Sur, and that when you drove down the coast, you don't see any of it. And so he wanted me, he said, well, you're local, you know, find out what's in there and document it. And so that was actually the hidden architecture of Big Sur. So that was actually how I met you, was that project. And I can like get that experience of getting to uncover these houses that you've built in this magical environment that I grew up in. And they're so sophisticated, they're so modern, but yet they're modern and clean, but yet they're warm, and they're very soft.
And they have texture. We think, you know, people think of modern as chrome and steel and glass, and that's more urban modern. And for us, modern just means, you know, of the time that it's built, and then lots of texture and you're
natural
really
materials.
good at that too. I mean, I know your work and
yeah. There's a simplicity, and then there's also letting the views and the vistas really be the art and the focal point. So you're almost framing it's like, you know, like I think about like Louis Kahn's work, where he'll create these giant massive spaces, and then he'll just kind of frame out this kind of contrasting naturescape in a way that you might just be walking through that nature and not necessarily experience it. But once you kind of get into this form and structure and raw material, and then you have this framed nature, it becomes almost like an enhancement of your appreciation for that landscape.
So many people want just floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall glass facing dead on to the ocean, and then they move because it's glare and it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't change that much. And so you're much better off to select your views and be aware of things like that mistakes that people make.
You know, I love this idea of having an opportunity to interview people who have been in this field for a long time and have some insights into some of the most common dynamics, or sort of, like, I find when you go on a job site, there's kind of this dynamic sometimes between the builder and the architect and the owner and the designer, and there's sometimes you'll find this dynamic of people blaming people or things going wrong, or these sort of these these challenges. It doesn't have to be, and
we don't like that.
And establishing sort of a team right off the bat, with a dynamic of collaboration, and we can get through this, and we know we know we're going to bump into things, and we're going to get through it. But
yeah, we're all on the same team.
Right. But if I'm a potential client and I'm interested in building, sometimes I find with clients there's some advice that you want to give them down the road, but it's almost too personal at that time, or you can't. It's hard to give it to them face to face. So if there was some insight that you were going to give a potential client before they ever walked in your office, what are some of the things that maybe you bump into that you kind of have to retrain clients over and over again, maybe successfully or unsuccessfully?
Well, I think good design should actually save you money. It shouldn't cost more. For many reasons, and not just in the construction, but in the time of construction, the amount of time it takes to construct something. We are very thorough and would like our clients to make all the decisions before we start to build. That is the best way to save money and avoid the conflicts that you're talking about.
Right.
Because you have maybe 3 bids, competitive bids. There'll be usually a significant spread between the numbers of the high and low bid.
You've got to dig into that.
And you have to make sure everybody's bidding for the same thing.
Right.
But once you have that, then you're locked into a single cost, and we should not have any cost overruns. That's where it gets tough when oftentimes, builders will tell you, oh, well, if we do a time and materials, we'll save you money, because, that's never, in 40 years experience, that's
Right.
never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. Never did, never will. So, you need bids, and so to have everybody bid on the same thing, you have to select everything.
So let's talk about that, because I would say that absolutely, like if you can, well, so first of all, how much time would you give someone? Because I think maybe if someone buys a property and they think, oh, I can get permits in a couple months. I don't know, like people sometimes don't know the process. So maybe just if someone were buying a piece of property, how much time would you give them before they can expect to start building? On a property,
it
it
kind of depends what you're building.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're doing a new home on the coast,
Right.
it's probably going to take you a year to get the permits, and then a year or more to build the house.
And a year to get the permits includes the design process.
Right.
And so let's talk about the design process a little bit, because we were talking about the changes in technology, the changes in modeling that's happened probably since you've started this profession, and how dramatically that can help a client visualize a space and maybe kind of on the front line help with some of those issues that you see so much of changes happening on the field or change orders after the fact.
We work in three dimensions only, computer generated program called Revit. And so everything we do is in a model. So everything has to be figured out or the model doesn't fit together, right? You can't really fake a model. Right. And so because of that, we can also show the client as the model progresses and gets more detail and adds materials, we can actually show the client exactly what the house is going to look like, how it fits on the land, what the rooms look like, what the views are like. We can show them all that before we start construction. So we can work things out, and the client can have the share our vision. They can see exactly what it's going to look like. They don't have to try to read two-dimensional plans, which is very difficult, frankly, for most people.
It's very difficult. Yeah. I mean, I find as a designer, like, that the vision comes without any effort, really. I mean, once I understand the client and I understand their taste, I understand the site, the vision is quick, usually. There's some, like, at least it's like a broad concept and an abstract concept. But it's really the work over the years. It can take years to actually get to that. It's that communication process, getting everybody on the same page, working on the details and the construction. So kind of going back to the 3D, do you feel like that 3D modeling system is sort of a solution to some of, because I would say that changing the design mid-build is also for me an experience that causes the most havoc, and especially when you're dealing with the different review processes.
You know, for us to move a line or move a wall on a drawing compared to moving a wall on a building, you can imagine it's a factor of probably 20 or 30 times more expensive.
Of course.
So it just makes sense to really work it out in the drawings, and that's what we do. And we spend a tremendous amount of time working all the details out. You know, one thing I did want to touch on is the sort of crisis in California right now with the wildfires, and what the result of that is that insurance companies aren't writing policies in California anymore. My insurance company said that if I sold my house, they would not write the buyer a new insurance policy.
Right, so that could halt some construction.
Well, so what it means, and what we are really working hard on researching and developing is a fireproof house. So that the house is completely fireproof and you don't even need insurance. I think what's going to happen in California is that fire insurance is going to be like earthquake insurance, where you have the state provides the policy. Your deductible can be up to 25% of the value of your home. You have to pay the first 25%, and then it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's just part of the natural cycle there in Big Sur.
And plus, your house is gone. You lose everything. Whereas if you have a fireproof house, you're not going to lose everything.
Right,
so
that makes so much
we're
sense.
doing that. It's not going to be a noticeable.
Right.
Indifferent that it's obviously a fireproof house. It's just something we're working on. So that's exciting.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really needed. Well, it's nice to have you.
Oh.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Thank you.